Hello and welcome to this video tutorial, brought to you by tastytunes.com. In this tutorial, I will be demonstrating how to introduce objects, colour and effects into my Adobe InDesign project. So here I am in InDesign with my current composition, and this is where I left off in the previous video, where I demonstrated how to modify images from InDesign in Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator. Now let's take a look at the finished composition. And I'm going to press W on the keyboard to toggle into preview mode. Now I can see things more clearly. Now taking a closer look, I can see we have some colour on the header text. We have a key line separating the header from the paragraph text. I have what appears to be a lighter shade of black on the paragraph header text. I seem to have a gradient background. And looking on the bottom, I have this dark grey bar spanning the width of the page. Coming over to the back page, I have a yellow colour header that matches the bike image. I have a dark gradient background, and the text is white now on top of this. Coming in closer, I have these yellow circles for bullet points, and looking both at the circles and the racetrack graphic, I have drop shadows applied. And I have another keyline stroke. Coming over to the cover page, looking at the header, I can see that this is white and the CBR part of the text has this green effect applied. Under this is another keyline stroke, and coming down to the bottom of the page, I have a white Honda logo with a drop shadow. If I come to the inside spread, on the first page I can see nothing has changed much to the grid of images, but now we have the same grey bar at the bottom of the page running across all three pages. On the next page, all the header text also seems a little lighter. I have a series of keyline strokes, and these appear to be neatly separating the images and text. And again, we have this gradient background. Coming across to the last page, behind the table we have this black background, and the text is now white on top. Looking closely at the table, we have strokes between each row. We have another keyline under the header, and each bike image has a stroke applied to their frames. Okay, so quite a few things going on there. I'm now going to demonstrate how I can do all this. So back in my current comp, I'm going to make a start on page 1 here, with the nice bold text, and I'm going to incorporate some colour. So I'm just going to zoom in. So first I'm going to come over to my swatches panel down here in the right. If you don't have the swatches panel visible, you can activate it from Window, Colour, and select it here. So I'm going to expand this panel a little so I can see the contents more clearly. So in Adobe InDesign, when you create a document from scratch, by default you will have these swatches in the panel, a few common colours. But if I want to get more variety, I'm going to have to add these and create them myself. If I take a look at the finished comp, I can see I have lots more swatches here. So how were these added? So back in my current comp, if I come to the swatches panel and click on the top right button on the panel, I can choose New Colour Swatch. Then a properties window will appear. Here we can customize a few properties, starting with the colour type. I can choose between process or spot, change the color mode. Now primarily it will be either RGB or CMYK, but you also have a vast choice down here, but we are not going to worry about that for now. Then depending on which you choose, RGB or CMYK, in this case I'm going to choose CMYK, I can toggle the values of each part, cyan, magenta, yellow and black. So I'm just going to toggle a few of these until I get a particular colour, and then I'm going to press OK. Then this will be placed in our colour swatch, and we can see it right here in the swatches panel. If I double click on this again, I can pull up the same properties box and make further changes if I so wish. Now normally I would not create swatches in this way. I would normally compose my artwork in Adobe Photoshop and copy the colour values from Photoshop and paste them into my properties box. Now, I don't want this swatch, so I'm going to drag it into the trash bin like so. Right then, so now I want to get some colours that I'm going to use in the header text. Now looking at my overall composition, I would really like to get some colours out of the bike images I already have on my composition. such as some of the colours in the bike images here on page 5. So how can I do this? Now, I want to show you a neat little trick. I'm going to zoom into these bike images here like so. If I come over to the menu and select the eyedropper tool, I can move my mouse cursor over a particular image and then a particular colour of that image and click to select. And I'm going to select this purple blue here of the motorbike. And upon click, notice now in the menu at the bottom, the fill colour has now changed to that same colour blue from the bike. Pretty cool. So now what I need to do is come over to the menu, right click on the fill colour square and click add to swatches. And there it is in our swatches panel, a brand new swatch. If I double click on this, we can then take a closer look at the values that make up this colour. If I want to, I can uncheck the name with colour value box and name the colour myself, but I'm just going to leave it as is for now and click OK. So right then, with that principle, I'm going to gather more colours. So I'm going to grab the eyedropper tool and select this orange colour here and add this to the swatches panel. Then I'm going to select this blue, then select a red, then select a green, then this purple, then a grey, and then I'll take the yellow from the back page image. And that will do it for now. So now we have lots of new colours in our swatches panel to choose from. So coming back to my page 1, I'm now going to select my text frame here with my selection tool and double click to now activate the text tool within. I'm going to start by selecting just the top line, and with this selected, I'm going to come over to my swatches panel and select a colour, in this case a dark blue. And if I just click off that selected text, I can see that the colour has now been applied. Excellent! Now I'm going to select the next line, clicking and dragging like so, and this time I'm going to go for an orange colour. And again click off, and there it is in orange. So I'm now going to go through the rest of this text, doing the same thing, selecting the text I want, and then choosing a colour for it. And I'll do this until I have successfully changed the colour of each line, and I'll end up with something like this. Now if I press W on the keyboard to toggle into preview mode, I can get a nice look at it without the frame outlines, and that's looking quite nice. So I'll press W again to go back into normal mode. Okay, so looking at the finished comp, I can see this gradient background. So back into my current comp, I'm going to come to the menu and select the rectangle tool. Then I'm going to draw a tall frame down the side of my pasteboard area like so. And you will see it will fill this with whatever colour I had currently selected. Now I need to come to the menu again and this time select the gradient swatch tool. This is about halfway down, so I'm going to click this. Now notice how my mouse cursor has changed to a crosshair now. Well, I'm going to move into the block I just created, and in the frame I'm going to click and drag down like so. And now all of a sudden we have a black and white gradient. Now if I come to Window, Color, and select Gradient, I can now see the gradient panel, and I can customize the gradient. If I want to change the color of the gradient, I can simply drag a color swatch from the swatch panel into the gradient like so. And if I want to remove a color, I can simply click and drag out like so. In this case, I want to keep it black and white, and I can close the gradients panel for now. So now with the gradient strip selected, I'm going to select the right middle pointer and drag it across the entire 3 pages. Now because it's the most recent item on the composition, it is set above everything else. Next I'm going to right click on my object, scroll to Effects and select Transparency. Now I'm going to change the transparency to 25% and click OK. Now we can see the artwork under this, of course, because it's transparent. Lastly, I'm going to right click again, scroll down to Arrange and click Send to Back. Now all the artwork will sit on top of my gradient background. And if I press W on the keyboard, I can see this in preview mode. It's looking okay. So pressing W again, I will bring back to normal mode. Now I'm going to need this gradient background on the other spread as well. So now I'm going to simply copy and paste this gradient onto the next spread. I can do this by selecting the frame with the selection tool, pressing Command C to copy, moving over to my inside spread. First I need to click into my new spread and then press Command V to paste. And then I'll move it into place if I need to. And again I need to right click on the object, scroll down to Arrange and click Send to Back. And now that's neatly placed into the composition. I can press W on the keyboard to toggle preview mode to have a quick look at it. And it's looking just fine. So again I'll press W to come back into normal mode. So let's come back to page 1 and now take a look at the finished composition. Next I have this keyline stroke under my header here. So back in the current comp, I'm going to go ahead and place this keyline just under the header. Now look closely at the header frame. The frame seems to be expanding down a little. Now I want to draw my stroke in this area, so this may interfere with my stroke. So with the frame selected, I'm just going to double click on the bottom middle point and this should snap to the bottom text line like so. Now I have a nice neat space here to work with. Okay, so for the keyline, this is easily done by coming to the menu, selecting the line tool. Now I'm going to bring my mouse cursor to the far left margin guide within my page, and I'm going to click and drag across to meet the inside margin on the right. Now I have the flexibility to draw the line how I want, but if I want a straight line, however, I'm going to have to press and hold Shift on the keyboard. Notice how I press on and off Shift, how the line goes from straight to where my mouse cursor is. Well, with the Shift button held down, I'm going to drag over to the inside margin on the right and release. And by pressing V, I can activate the selection tool and click off the stroke. And that's cool. Next, in my complete comp, I can see that the bold intro paragraph seems to be a lighter color compared to that in the current comp. Well, to do this, I can either create a new color swatch like demonstrated earlier, or I could select the text like so. Using the text tool, come over to the swatches panel and I can currently see that the black is highlighted, suggesting that this is the color applied. Now if I look up on the swatches panel, I can see that there is this tint value. If I change this to 80%, then choose the selection tool from the menu and click off, I can see this text is now lighter. All I have done here is change the tint of the black to make it a lighter shade. Simple. So next on the final comp, I can see this black line that goes across the bottom of the page. So back in my current comp, I will move down to the bottom of page 1 to get a good view. I'm going to select the rectangle tool from the menu and click and drag a frame across the bottom of the page like so. On release, it will fill the frame with whatever color I so happen to have. Then with the frame selected, I'm going to come into the swatches panel and select black. Now I'm going to press V on the keyboard to activate my selection tool, and I'm going to right click and come down to Effects. Then I'm going to choose Transparency, and I'm going to change the transparency to 65% and click OK. Now I'm going to press W on the keyboard to get a good view of this. With the object selected, I'm just going to use the arrow keys on the keyboard to finally move this object around into place. And that's looking alright. Now, like with the gradient background, I'm also going to need this on the inside spread. And I'm also going to want to put this in the exact same place. Now I want to demonstrate a neat little trick. So with the selection tool, I will select the object, press Command C to copy, then move over into my inside spread so I can clearly see my page on the far left. With the selection tool, I'm going to click into my spread, then I'm going to press and hold on the keyboard, Shift, Alt and Command, and then press V. This is the command for paste in place. Now if I had simply pressed Command V to paste like so, notice how it just pasted the object in a random position. So it was very useful on this occasion to use the command paste in place. Remember that one. So I'm going to undo that and I'm going to come back to the selection of my newly pasted object here on the bottom of page 4 under the grid of images. Okay, so next I want this to stretch across the entire 3 pages. So with the object selected, I will click and hold on the middle right point and simply drag across the 3 pages like so. But now I can see that this object is overlapping the bottom grid images here on page 4. So with the selection tool, holding Shift on the keyboard, I'm going to select the bottom 4 images, and with the arrow keys simply move them up above the black block like so. And that's looking okay. So I'm going to come back up and focus on the back page. And on the finished comp, I can see I want what looks like a dark gradient background. So back on my current comp, I'm going to select the rectangle tool and draw a frame covering all the page apart from the image above. With the frame selected, I'm going to choose black from the swatches panel. Then I'm going to right click, scroll down to arrange and send to back. Then I'll press V to activate the selection tool and click off. Pressing W, I can toggle into preview mode to get a good look. Now you may be wondering, I just created a solid black object and sent that to the back, but now it appears to have a gradient. Well, that is because now it is behind the first gradient we created earlier, the white and black gradient, and that has a 65% opacity applied to it. So now part of the white is on top of the black object we just sent to the back. Next, I'm going to double click into the top text frame and select all by pressing Command A and change the color to white. And with the text tool still active, I will click into the rest of the text frames on this page apart from the numbers and change all the text to white. Next, I will come back to the top text frame. With the text tool, I'm going to select the top header and change it to the yellow swatch I created earlier. Then choose the selection tool in the menu and click off so I can see it. Next, I'm going to zoom right into the 3 bullet points here on the left. Looking on the final comp, I want to create 3 yellow circles to place behind each of these. Back in the current comp, I can do this by coming over to the menu, clicking and holding on the rectangle tool until I can see a choice of more. Then I will select the ellipse tool. If I come onto the composition, click and drag out, I will begin to draw a circle, though if I press Shift on the keyboard, I'll be able to draw a circle to scale, like so. So I'm going to draw a circle to the size I feel is going to work for me, and I'm going to release. So now I need to change this to a yellow without a stroke. This can easily be done by coming over to the menu and paying close attention to the fill and stroke color at the bottom. First, I'm going to click the stroke color, then come over to the swatches panel and select the swatch called None. This will take away any stroke applied. Then back to the menu, I'm going to click on the fill color and then come to the swatches panel and select the yellow. With the selection tool, I will select my new circle and move it over to the first number. However, we can see it is currently set on top. To rectify this, I can simply move my circle out of the way, select the number, right-click, scroll down to Arrange and bring to front. Now if I move the circle back, it will appear under the number. Excellent. So now I want to duplicate the circle and place them behind the 2 numbers below. So let's go ahead and try and select the circle. Now it's going to be a little tricky, as now the text frame is set on top. If I use the selection tool to try and select the circle, it's going to select the text frame above first. So to get around this, I need to first click on the text frame, hold Command on the keyboard, click once again, and the selection tool will click through the top frame and onto the frame immediately below it. So now we have the circle selected. I'm going to press and hold Alt on the keyboard and click and drag like so. This will make a quick copy of the circle. So using the techniques earlier, I'm going to rearrange the text frames in order to be positioned above the circles. So now we have the bullet points just how I want them. Now if I look at the final comp, I can see that the racetrack image and the yellow circles have drop shadows. So back in the current comp, I'm going to select the racetrack frame using the selection tool, and I'm going to right click. I'm going to scroll down to Effects, come over and select Drop Shadow. Now upon clicking this, a properties window will appear. On the left, we have the choice of potential effects we can apply to the image, and on the right we have the properties of the current effect I have selected. So I can see I have the drop shadow effect selected, and to the right all the properties I can toggle. If I look closely in the bottom left, I can see a button called Preview. This is currently unchecked. If I click this, I can now see in the composition area a preview of the drop shadow, and if I tweak the drop shadow properties, I can see this change. So I'm going to keep the mode as multiply, keep the opacity set to 75%, I'm going to tweak the distance to 2mm, leave everything else the same and tweak the size to 1mm and then click OK. So now I can see a nice drop shadow on the image. Now because this image is a vector, it has a transparent background, and InDesign detects this, so the drop shadow is applied like so. So now I need to apply the drop shadow to the 3 yellow circles. To do this quickly, I can first select the 3 numbers on top of them by holding Shift and selecting all 3. Then with the arrow keys, I'm simply going to move the numbers out of the way. Then I will select all 3 circles with the selection tool, holding Shift to select multiple objects. And with all 3 selected, I will right click, scroll down to Effects, and select Drop Shadow. Now you will see that the drop shadow is applied to all 3. I'm going to tweak the properties, just like earlier, and click OK. Then click off them to deselect them. So that's a way to apply effects to multiple objects at the same time. So now I'm going to simply move my numbers back onto my yellow circles like so. Next, I want to create another stroke under these. Now I could use the stroke tool like earlier, but I already have one I need on page 1. So with the selection tool, I'm going to select my stroke on page 1, press and hold Alt, and click and drag to duplicate my stroke, and I'm going to position it like so. But this stroke is black, and I need to change it to white. So with it selected, over in my menu, I will click on the stroke color, and in my swatches panel, I'll select white. Simple. So that's everything on the back page. But if I look on the complete comp, all elements seem to be positioned a little better. So back in my current comp, I'm going to move all my elements around a little. If I select the racetrack image, see how the frame comes down. Well, with it selected, if I double click the bottom middle point, it will then snap the bottom of the content to the frame. And I'm going to use the arrow keys to move this down a little. Next, I want to move all the bullet point frames down, but this will be tricky. As there is a few frames that make up this composition, it's going to prove tricky to select them all. Now, I currently have the 2 background elements on this page, the gradient background and the solid black block. Now, with the selection tool, I'm going to click in the area above the racetrack image, and this will select the gradient background. And I know this as I can click and drag it around. Now, if I right click and select lock, this will now lock this frame, and I won't be able to select it again. And if I look in the top left of the gradient frame, I can see this little icon. This reminds me that this frame is now locked. If I want to unlock this frame, all I have to do is click on this icon, and the frame can be selected again. Okay, so now I have locked this frame, I need to do the same to the black block. So again, with this selected, I can right click and select lock. So now all the background frames are locked. This is going to enable me to click and drag over all the bullet point elements and move them down like so. Easy peasy. Next, with the selection tool, I'm going to select the text frame above and move this down with the arrow keys. This will make more space above. So I'm going to select the image frame and expand the frame down slightly to reveal more of the image within. Oh, and by the way, we can see that here, that this headline text needs to be in uppercase, comparing it to the finished comp. So with this text highlighted, I'm going to come into the control panel and select the all caps button. So now if I choose the selection tool from the menu, click off the text box and press W on the keyboard, I can now see that this page is looking much better. So now I'm going to turn to the cover page. Looking at the complete comp, I can see the header is white with the green color effect applied to the CBR text, and I have a stroke under this. So back in my current comp, I can start by first selecting the frame and double clicking into the frame to activate the text tool. Then I will select all and change the color to white. Then choose the selection tool and click off. Now this text is a little smaller than I would like, so with the selection tool, I will select the frame, press S on the keyboard to activate the scale tool, move my mouse cursor to the bottom right, hold shift on the keyboard, and scale up the text like so to make it bigger. And that's looking better. Then I will press V to activate my selection tool and quickly double click on the bottom middle point of this, and we will see this will snap the frame to the bottom line. Nice and neat. So now I want to apply the green effect to the CBR text. To do this, I'm going to double click into the text box and select the CBR text. With this selected, I need to come over to the menu and make sure I have the fill color selected, and I'm going to select the green color from the swatch. But I also want to apply a stroke to this. So I will select the stroke color and then select a black. So now I will choose the selection tool and I will see how this looks. And that's looking just fine. Now looking at the complete comp, I want to apply this white shade over the top. To do this, I'm going to duplicate my header text. With the selection tool, I'm going to select the header frame, press and hold Alt, and click and drag below. With the duplicated text, I'm going to double click into the new frame and remove the words Honda and 125R. So I'm left with the words CBR. Choose the selection tool and click out, and then resize the frame so it's not so big. So now I have the CBR text exactly the same size. So I'm going to double click into the new frame and change the text color. This time I'm going to change the fill color to white and the stroke color to green. I'm going to choose the selection tool and click off. Now I'm going to click and move this new CBR text over the original like so, and I may need to use the arrow keys to finally position this above. With the text box selected, I'm going to right click, scroll down to Effects and choose Transparency. Change this to 80% and click OK. Now, with the text frame still selected, I'm going to come over to the menu, and this time I'm going to select the Gradient Feather tool just under the Gradient tool. With this tool selected, I'm going to come over to the text, click on the top and drag down to the bottom of the CBR text. And just like that, we have applied a gradient feather and applied a really cool little effect to the text. So with the selection tool, I'm going to click off this and press W on the keyboard to toggle to preview mode to get a better look. And that's looking pretty cool. But I can still see it's not aligned right to the top of my margin guide here. So with the selection tool, I'm going to click and drag over all the text, but we also have selected the image under this. So holding Shift, I'm going to click the image to deselect it, and then use the arrow keys to move it up into place like so. So next I'm going to select the line tool, click here on the left inside margin, hold Shift, drag across to draw a straight line, and on release I'm going to change the stroke fill to white, and then that completes the header composition. If I move down to the bottom of the cover page, I want to apply a drop shadow to this logo. So just like earlier, I will select the frame with the selection tool, right click, scroll down to Effects, click Drop Shadow, adjust the properties and click OK. And that completes the outside spread. So coming down to the inside spread, I can see from earlier I have already placed my gradient background and my baseline. So looking at the finished comp, I can see I am going to need some stroke lines here on page 5. So back on my current comp, I'm going to select the line tool, click on the left inside margin and drag across to the right inside margin, holding Shift to draw a straight line and release. Then I'm going to press V to activate the selection tool, and I'm going to click on the stroke and using the arrow keys push up the stroke to sit under my headline. So I'm now going to duplicate this line below by holding Alt on the keyboard, clicking and dragging down. And I'm going to drop it under the next header like so. But this time I want the stroke to be slimmer. With the stroke selected, I'm going to come across to the bottom panel group and select the Stroke tab. If you cannot see the Strokes panel, come to Window, scroll down and activate the Stroke panel here. So with the Stroke panel visible, the stroke selected, I'm going to change the weight to 0.25. Then I'm going to duplicate the stroke another 2 times to sit under my 2 headers and use the arrow keys to finally place them. So pressing W, I can now see this page in preview mode, and that's looking cool. But the top text is looking awfully tight up there. I need to reposition some of the elements to create more space. So back in normal mode, I'm first going to click on the background gradient, right click and lock, so this won't interfere in future. So I'm going to click and drag over the bottom bike images and header text and move down with my arrow keys. I'm going to do the same with the middle pair, and again for the top pair. Then pressing W, I can see that the top looks a lot better and less cramped. Lastly, I'm going to click into the header and select all the text and change the tint from 100% to 80% black, and this will give it a more lighter appearance. I will then do this to the rest of the headers on this page. Okay, so on to the last page. Almost done. So on the complete composition, I have this black object behind the table, white text on top with white strokes between each row, and strokes around the images here. So let's do this on the current comp. So I'm going to start by selecting the rectangular tool from the menu, coming over to my page and drawing a frame over the table like so. On release, I will have my new frame, and I'm going to change the fill color to black and change the stroke color to none. Then I'm going to right click and center back, but notice I still have a gradient here. Well, this is because sending to the back, I now have the gradient on top of it, which is 65% black and white. Now I'm going to have to send the gradient frame again to the back behind the black frame if I'm to get rid of the gradient effect. But currently the gradient background is locked, so if I come across to the top left of the gradient frame, I can see this little lock icon. By clicking this, I will release the lock and I'll be able to right click on this and send to back. Now back to the last page, and I can see that the gradient effect is now lost and I have a solid black frame. Excellent. So now with the text tool, I'm going to click into the top frame, select all and change the color to white. Then I'm going to click into the top left frame in the table and click and drag down to the bottom right frame to select all the contents. Coming over to the menu, if I look closely under the color squares, I have 2 little icons. On the left is the Formatting Effects container, and to the right is the Formatting Effects text. I need to click this little icon as I just want to change the text. Now I will change the fill color to white. This will change all the text to white. So choosing the selection tool and clicking off, by pressing W to view preview mode, this is looking okay. But now I want to get the strokes between each row in the table to be white. So back in normal mode, I'm going to select all the rows and columns like so. Now in the menu, I can see that the current stroke fill is set to black. Now I need to come up to the control panel. And now I should see this little white square here with a grid inside. Well, this grid is a representation of the column strokes and row strokes. This little box is going to give me the ability to select a particular stroke line within the table and change the color. For example, currently they are all highlighted. If I change the stroke color to pink, and I can do this right next to the grid, by clicking off and pressing W, I can see it has changed all the strokes to pink. Now, reselecting all the rows and columns, if I come back up to this little grid and carefully click on the top and bottom of the rows, now I just have the side stroke selected. Now, if I change the color to none and click off, now all I am left with is the pink strokes between the rows. So all I have left to do is select them all again, deselect the sidebars in the grid, and reselect the top and bottom row lines, change the stroke color to white, click off, and bingo! Just what I wanted. But if I look in the finished comp, I can see that the lines are much slimmer, and I do not have a row stroke at the top and bottom. So back in my current comp, I'm going to select all the rows and columns again, come into my stroke panel, and currently the weight is set to 1 point. I'm now going to set this to 0.25, and that's looking a lot better. Next, I need to come up and just select the top row, and in the grid in the control panel, deselect everything apart from the top line. Change the stroke to none, and do the same to the bottom row. Just this time, deselect the top line and select the bottom line, change the colour to none, and that completes the formatting of my table. Next, I need to create my stroke under the header. So with the line tool, I'm going to click on the inside left margin and holding shift to create a straight line, I'm going to drag over to the right to meet the right side column guide. I'm going to make sure the stroke colour is set to white and use the arrow keys to finally position the stroke under the header. Next, I need to select the top right text frame and click on the left middle point and drag this in so it's not too close to the black frame. And lastly, select the two bike images with the selection tool, press and hold shift on the keyboard, select the top and select the bottom frame, then change the stroke colour to black, and in the stroke panel, change the weight to 0.25. So that is how we can manage objects, add colour, and apply effects in Adobe InDesign. So now we are almost finished with this composition. In the next video, I will be finishing off the document and using the pre-flight tool in InDesign. This is used in the last stages in a document build. The pre-flight is used to check for any problems and best prepare the composition ready for print. So I'll see you in the next video.